A day of entertainment in Arlington, Virginia. The local Latin American community get together to enjoy their own music and culture. They're part of a global movement of poor migrant workers who travel to richer countries to work and to send money home to support the families they've left behind. Worldwide, it's estimated that flow of money amounts to a staggering $200 billion a year. What impact can it have in the fight against poverty? To find out more, Life has travelled to the United States and El Salvador to uncover this hidden economy. There have always been economic migrants, people who swap regions, countries, even continents to find better wages to pay for a better life.
Remittances have been around for generations upon generations, but they are accelerating. People move north by the millions, and money moves south by the billions.
The Treasury Department and the U.S. government is extremely interested in remittances. Until about 5 years ago, we didn't appreciate the magnitude of the flows, and still it's very hard to identify really how many remittances are leaving the U.S.
This is a global phenomenon. We estimate that there are about $200 billion sent all over the world by some 150 million immigrants.
1 out of every 10 people on the planet either sends or receives money from abroad. And unlike all other forms of financial aid that travels into developing countries, remittances go directly to poor people.
It turns out that remittances to Latin America are more than all of the foreign direct investment and all of the official development assistance, all the foreign aid combined. And these are enormous flows going into these countries, and they support tens of millions of families.
Huge sums of money are involved, and the way this money is sent from A to B is being revolutionized. Not surprisingly, the banking community is starting to show an interest. As a result, the days of smuggling dollars home may soon be over, together with the expense of using transfer agents.
The cost of remitting is going down. The more that the banks have become involved, the lower the fees have become. But I think remittance is much more than a transfer. It's about linking two families, two economies.
The vast majority of economic migrants who come to the United States are from Latin America. More than 1 million come from El Salvador, a country hard hit by tragedy in the last 25 years. First, a bitter 12-year civil war, which ended in 1992, claimed the lives of 75,000 people. Then came a series of natural disasters. Hurricane Mitch in 1998, followed by a number of earthquakes in 2001. Each has contributed to the country's poverty and sent tens of thousands in search of work abroad. As a consequence, remittances have leapt from less than $1 billion in 1994 to $2.5 billion in 2004, or roughly 17.1% of GDP. Today, the exodus of workers still continues, and the government has created a special ministerial office for them.
The war generated a great deal of migration, but then there was another kind of migration that continued during the period of peace and national reconstruction. These two distinct scenarios led to a quarter of the population living abroad. This has an enormous impact on the political, economical, social and cultural life in our country.
In rural areas like Tronalagua, up to a third of the people depend on money from abroad. Julio and Ana Cortez are among them. Each month they get $200 from their elder children in Washington. It's made a world of difference to Julio and Ana and their remaining children.
Here is the kitchen. Over there you have the utensils. The telephone to call my children. Here is the living room. And this is the refrigerator. And the part above, where you have the ice, is colder. And down below, it's less cold. Here on the entertainment center is the television. All this with remittances.
Some argue remittances are turning El Salvador into a nation of consumers. But in reality, most of the money is used to pay for necessities like food and clothing. And in Julio and Anna's case, improvements on their house.
Before the children left, our house had a dirt floor made of clay. It wasn't like this one. We were afraid it was going to fall down on us, but with remittances, we built this house.
Over 6,000 kilometers away, suburban Washington, USA. This is where some of Anna and Julio's older children came to find work and to live. They arrived here illegally. First Elmer in 1998, then Hector in 1999, and finally Dalila in 2001.
I suffered a lot en route. I suffered from hunger. We walked for many miles. They hid us in trailers. We were thirsty, exposed to the sun and the rain. After 28 days, I reached here.
We came for the American dream. In our countries, a lot of people have this dream because of poverty. When you get here, you realize it's more like a nightmare because of how hard you have to work every single day. We came voluntarily because we wanted to look after our families. We need to support our families.
The Salvadoran government says illegal migration is a risk that many are willing to take, and that problems continue long after they arrive.
Si lo logran hacer, entonces ellos tienen otros problemas.
If they manage to enter, they have other problems, such as wage levels, labor rights, social security coverage, all the problems of being undocumented that affects migrants to their core.
De cualquier migrante.
Dalila and her brothers are lucky. They've received temporary protected status, a kind of amnesty which allows them to work. It was introduced by the US government in 1990 to help people who can't return home because of conflict or natural disasters. So far, it's been granted to nearly 350,000 Latin Americans. But the permit is temporary. If Dalila and her brothers leave the US, they won't be allowed back. A telephone call is as close as Dalila and her mother Anna have been in 4 years.
I heard on the news that those with temporary permits might be given residency. But they didn't say when. If they do, we can visit.
Ahí seguimos en comunicación. ¿Sí? Los quiero
I
mucho.
love you a lot.
Bueno, cuídense. Gracias, bye.
Dalila might prefer to be in El Salvador, but there is still a shortage of jobs and a big gap between rich and poor. According to 1999 figures, the richest fifth of the population held nearly half of the country's wealth. The poorest fifth, just 5.6%. Remittances are making a difference to the poorest people, but there are drawbacks. The government admits that for the younger generation, success means going elsewhere to earn money, and that can dislocate families.
También se observan algunos patrones de cambio.
We can see patterns of change in the concept of success for young Salvadorians. They identified with the word migrate. Another effect of migration is the disintegration of the nuclear family. This has had an enormous social impact.
The negative effect is that you have communities that are divided. I mean, mothers that have to leave their children behind. There are certain communities in El Salvador where you only find the elderly and the children. I mean, what kind of society will that be in the future?
There are times when one feels a little bit jealous, especially when so-and-so is sent money.
Rosalia Benitez is Julio and Anna's neighbour, and one of the many people in the community who don't receive money from abroad.
The people who don't get remittances, they say he should watch his money, because what if the person in the United States dies? What will he do then?
Rosalia and her daughters live with 7 other relatives. Sometimes there's not enough food to go round. Even so, Rosalia is determined not to follow the money trail north to America.
Yes, I have often thought of leaving to work as a wetback, as they say, to help my family. But then I think that I would lose my daughter's love if I left them. I could send money back into their lives, but what about love and education? It's not the same.
Remittances play a huge role in supporting many poor families. But are some countries becoming too dependent on this flow of money?
Remittances create a safety net that the state doesn't have to deal with. And the more money you send home to feed, clothe, and provide medical attention to your family, the less obligation on the state and the more freedom of the state to engage in any kind of less responsible activity.
Increasingly, migrant groups in the US are taking on financial responsibilities once left to the state. Known as hometown associations, groups like this one raise extra cash to send home for community projects. In 2004, more than $2 million was sent back to El Salvador.
We've been building churches, Red Cross building. We've been driving ambulance from here. The last project that we have a reforestation project because that's very critical in my country right now. We raise money constantly.
Some communities get so much money, they don't need to rely on the government to fund local improvements.
If you go to Chirilagua and Titicaca, those communities down there, they don't even bother to ask the government because they're self-sufficient. They get so much money from the state. A lot of the young kids after 9th grade, they already have a visa to immigrate.
Governments themselves in these developing countries absolutely need to do a much better job than they've been doing over the last 25 years. I think it is very, very important to underscore that remittances are not a substitute for sound economic policies at home, and remittances are certainly not a substitute for foreign assistance.
None of this is denied by the Salvadoran government, but in reality the country has few development options, and increasingly the government is trying to bring remittances into the mainstream economy.
Y donde publicamos este libro.
We have published a book containing all public policies addressed to Salvadorians living abroad and who would like to invest in the country. We offer technological assistance, procedures to set up a business, projects that may be of interest to Salvadorans.
Proyectos que pueden interesar a los salvadoreños.
The government is also working with international development organizations to encourage those who receive remittances to use the money in other productive ways.
they should continue using it for what they receive it for, which is to survive, to send their children to school, to have better shelter and so on. But we can also help them to multiply the effect of these remittances flows in their community.
With assistance from the UN agency IFAD, Julio and Ana have invested some money into their farm.
Ellas tienen la oportunidad de poder invertir en hacer algún tipo de infraestructura.
We give them an opportunity to invest in the infrastructure of their farms in ways that make them more profitable. Buying improved seeds and better quality supplies diminishes risks in productivity.
Disminuir el riesgo en la parte de la productividad.
Julio and Ana used to grow maize and beans, but just for their own consumption. Now they also grow fruit trees and rear animals, which earns them a profit of $200 a month.
I have more income because I work the land. I don't live solely from remittances.
Having opportunities to invest their remittances has helped pull the Cortez family further from poverty. But what about the rest of the community? Is there a way to spread the benefits? One answer may be to change how remittances are sent. The old methods were well known and dangerous. Mules or money smugglers would regularly carry thousands of dollars across the borders, and still do. Money transfer agents are a much more secure route. But transfers and smuggling are still expensive.
When we started looking at this 5 years ago, the cost of sending the money was often 15 to 20% of the total of the remittance. Economists would call that inefficient. The real word would be outrageous.
Now, with the scent of serious money in the air, some banks are starting to get involved. And that could lead to a reduction in costs, as well as a change in how remittances are transferred.
In the United States, we've seen banks increasingly become interested in this market. And it's partly because they understand that many immigrants in this country stay and become bank customers. Remittances are often what we call a loss leader, that it might be something where the bank is losing money in the immediate. They may be offering a $5, $10 a free remittance service. It's not free for a bank to offer a remittance service, but they use it as a way to get immigrants into the door.
Banks may call it relationship building, but for the people who receive remittances, banking can offer new financial possibilities. For example, they could get credit to start a business.
One of the causes of poverty is the lack of access to wealth generation. And you don't generate wealth just through employment, but through asset building. And you build assets through financing, through credit.
Who sent you this t-shirt? Dalila sent it. And these shorts, also Dalila. She is a great sister.
The Cortez family managed to save between $10 and $20 a month. If they and people like them put their savings into banks and credit unions rather than under their mattresses, it's estimated it would add another $250 million to the country's economy. And that means more money for banks to loan to others.
So even families that are not receiving remittances could benefit because they have nearby a financial institution that could provide them with financial services to which they didn't have access before.
A good example is Rosalia, Julio and Ana's neighbour. Still determined not to leave her children and migrate north, she's recently been able to obtain a small loan from a local credit union. Money that wouldn't have been available to her just a few years ago, she's now invested in rabbit farming.
Y a mí me encantó. Hasta este momento yo estoy muy contenta con ese dinero, pues se compra
I love it, and up to now I'm very content. With the money, we buy eggs, cheese, cream, cooking oil, some noodles, and sometimes I take the girls on an outing.
Y de vez en cuando sacar a las niñas a dar un paseo.
Indeed, aiding the flow of money to poor rural areas and to people like Rosalia may be the most important effect in the current transformation of the remittance market. In Washington, this woman is sending money to her family in El Salvador through a company specially set up to connect to microfinance institutions, small banks and credit unions in remote areas. Here, the broader economic impact of remittances could be the most beneficial. But such changes are slow in coming. And in the meantime, families will continue to make sacrifices as a means of survival.
When did you last see your children?
One was 7 years ago, the other 4 years ago. 2 were 4 and 1 was 3, and the last was 2 years ago.
It's been hard on our parents, but I know that our help makes them feel better. They know we are doing well here because we talk to them every week and send them money, and they know we are okay.
Being apart is hard, but the opportunity to earn better wages is why the Cortez children, and many like them, head for America. But as remittances increase, and with better ways of harnessing that wealth, perhaps one day the real opportunities will be found in El Salvador. Until then, the exodus of workers is bound to continue.
Thank you.